Welcome everyone. Please do tell us who you are, your name and your organisation in the chat box, and you should be able to get that at the bottom of your screen on the toolbar, and we can see who's with us today. My name's Leslie Judge. I look after sector engagement for tourism at Interface, and I'm also the project manager for Traveltech for Scotland, which you'll hear more about soon. I have my Interface colleagues Heather and Alina with us today, who are keeping our tech on track, so thanks to them. And we're going to explore the potential of IoT for tourism and the value of digital innovation for business today. And between Interface, Censis and Traveltech for Scotland and our academic colleagues, we are very keen to help with projects. If you want to get started on anything, that might include managing visitor flow, tracking, measuring visitor insights, increasing efficiency, managing resources better. So please do speak to us afterwards for an informal chat. And we're delighted to welcome today our speakers, Rachel Wakefield, Business Development Manager from Censis, Josh Ryan Saha, Project Director of Traveltech for Scotland, and Chris Moole, Head of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Robert Gordon University. Our speakers are going to have 20 minutes each, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. And we are delighted to follow up with the slides and facilitate connections afterwards. A little bit of housekeeping. So I think you're all on mute, so I'd ask you to stay on mute and keep your videos off and use the chat box for questions, and we'll put questions to the speakers at the end. And the video is being recorded and we'll be sharing it afterwards. So just a quick few words about Interface. So we have been on the go for 15 years. We're Scotland-wide. We act as matchmakers between businesses, industry and academia. We champion collaboration, and we offer a free service to all kinds of businesses and individuals to match them with Scotland's academic expertise for all kinds of projects. So projects could include supporting new product development, access to new markets, trying to increase revenue and profits, new ways of doing things, and that's more important now than ever. If we want to look at some project examples for the tourism sector, Alina, if you can just, yeah, okay, that's great. So some of the things that we're working on just now with businesses, applying artificial intelligence, looking at personalising the guest experience through understanding guest behaviour, developing recommendations engine technology, scraping social media data to understand visitor sentiment for a destination. They can use that as an insights tool. Tackling all kinds of issues that come up in tourism, so managing visitor flow, making things more efficient, perhaps developing prototypes. With immersive tech, there's quite a few projects on the go looking at for heritage tourism, for example, visitor attractions with virtual reality and augmented reality. It's not just tech, other kinds of tourism, for example, food tourism, accessible tourism. We've done a lot of workshops and storytelling and helping businesses collaborate together. And a popular way to do that is, there's lots of different ways to fund projects, but there's also lots of great student projects that we can offer businesses with different MSc or PhD, different stages of student development, offering business analytics, looking at the customer journey, accessing international markets, etc. So there's more information on our website, lots of case studies, and obviously you can get in touch with us afterwards. But I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into Interface. And now what I'd like to do is hand over to our first speaker, Rachel Wakefield, Business Development Manager from Censis. Thanks, Rachel.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Leslie. I'll just share my screen. So hoping you can all see that screen okay. So thank you, Leslie, and thanks everyone for logging into our webinar this morning. So just a little introduction. I'm one of the business development team at Censis, which is the innovation centre for sensors and imaging and IoT. And we're one of 8 not-for-profit technical innovation centres, and we're funded through the Scottish Funding Council, Scottish Enterprise and the Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and we're part of the Scottish Innovation Support Network. So we support private and public sector organisations, and our goal is to try and accelerate innovation by applying enabling technologies, and for us that's sensing and imaging systems and the Internet of Things. So on the Internet of Things, my slide deck today, I'm going to focus on IoT and applications within tourism. I'll provide just a little bit of background about IoT and run through a few examples. And the examples I've chosen are really around footfall tracking and visitor experiences. These seem to be the kind of top 3 areas of interest for people that I've spoken to in the tourism sector. And at the end, hopefully if there's time, I've got a couple of slides about some of the events we're running and some tools around getting started in IoT projects. So a very quick overview of the Internet of Things. It's really just devices that can connect to the internet, and by being connected, they can be managed, they can be controlled or actioned via that link. And if it's a sensor, it can provide information about the environment around it. Devices on the Internet of Things are usually part of a community or network of other devices. They can be locally or globally distributed, but until around 5 years ago, widespread adoption, I think, of IoT was really challenged by the cost of electronics devices. Didn't want to leave them lying around really, but also not really having the right kind of affordable, low power, widespread wireless communications infrastructure to get that data back into the cloud so you could actually see it, and among other challenges. So really the last 5 years, the Internet of Things has really brought a lot of disruptive technologies onto the market to enable these technologies to be adopted. And a major one has been low power wide area wireless communications, especially for Internet of Things data. And Scotland is one of 200 countries worldwide that's rolling out a national low power wide area infrastructure called IoT Scotland. But these open source radio networks do not need a license to operate. So they are being also set up as private networks by anyone skilled enough in these areas. So it's really proliferating out. And the mobile networks are also offering a similar infrastructure with next generation mobile, but these are confined to just where the existing mass structure is. But the important thing is that these networks enable sensors really to send data frequently over several miles without draining the battery. And the image here, it means we can do things like this. This is a water level sensor, and that is 2 miles away from the nearest internet point, and it's been sending data every 10 minutes over the last 2 years on the same coin cell battery. So it's on the West Highland Way, and it's been very reliable. So with the cost of electronic devices coming down, they're not really the most valuable part of the IoT system. The data is, which we'll hear from our other speakers. So the whole sector is in rapid growth, and it's currently estimated around $190 billion US, and it expects to grow over to 1.1 billion by 2026. So it's a really fast moving area now. And I think you could see from the bridge there, one of the main benefits of using IoT enabled devices is you can retrofit. It's a pop-up capability. And the sheer choice and diversity of the kind of sensor devices around now means they're a great contributor to digital transformation, because you can make some early digital replacements as a first step. Sometimes you want to gather information from things that you haven't been able to get information from before, or perhaps as frequently, and you can really do a test on return on investment before you decide to invest a bit more money into a new service. So footfall is one of the biggest areas of interest for tourism businesses, as I understand, and virtually anyone else with touch points in tourism, including other tourists. So here we're talking about fixed or static sensors that collect data from what's going on around them, and we can get different levels of insight depending on what kind of sensor technologies we deploy, from simple counting every time something goes by to quite sophisticated methods that can work out what kind of object is being counted and what it's doing. And if you add other information from sources other than the sensors, you can build up more insight. And on the left-hand side here is just a kind of list of footfall related data, and on the right hand kind of deeper insights we could get through when we begin to scale more of the same sensor or other sensor types, such as indoor climate, or data sources such as meteorological data as well. So IoT enables really us to build up information in layers over time and at scale. The image at the background there is just a representation of what's called a heat map. So you can understand how people move through a space, where they might be stopping, where they might be avoiding, and you can use that to work out bottlenecks, perhaps highlight popular not so popular spots, which is important if it's an exhibition space. And you can work out also wait times if there are queues as well. So this is a project we're running at the moment. It's part of an IoT Scotland demonstrator, so it's using those low power wide area networks. We're working with Stirling Council and Gartness and Drummond communities to deploy footfall sensors along the West Highland Way, and also have some river level sensors there and a local weather station. They're designed to be deployed in very mobile, very remote spots, and the sensor we're using is actually from Wilderness Sensors, who've got really great sensors that you can put up anywhere to begin to count footfall. So another important thing about this project is Stirling Council is hosting the data in a community IoT web dashboard, and that will be gradually scaled up. So it's really a work in progress, this project. They'll scale up in diversity of data, and there are multiple stakeholders interested in the data for various purposes, which I imagine will eventually port the data into their own software applications from these kind of community sources as well. So this next slide is a kind of more sophisticated way of tracking people and movement and understanding footfall. And Beringer is a company that we've worked with for several years as one of our previous IoT Technology Accelerator winners. This company uses machine vision and other sensor data, such as room climate, to understand occupancy of spaces. And this again is a retrofitted sensor unit for buildings. And it's secure by design, and it's got an onboard processor that's trained to recognize human figures only. And these are new on the market, perhaps 2 or 3 years old. And hopefully that'll run. So this is an island view of our office. So this is what the camera sees on the left. It's been trained to understand what people look like. And it keeps an eye on the movement every now and again and counts. And this is what you see on the right hand side. So there's no identifying features whatsoever. The video isn't streamed or stored in any way. But basically it sends out metrics. And so these kind of event cameras are quite low cost, are less than £200 now, and being used in more and more applications. So this next slide really is about location and tracking, where the sensor might be on a mobile asset in this case. So here on the left, we've got the kind of data we can get from a location tracking technology, and on the right, some ideas around the additional data that could add more insight and value. Location tracking can be achieved in a number of ways, layered onto a GIS map, or perhaps a floor plan schematic to provide understanding at a glance. So it's not just about providing graphs and numbers, it's about visualizing different ways to visualize the data to really enhance that understanding as well. So GPS is used obviously in outdoor tracking environments, and you can get a proximity of about 3 meters for that. Other methods are better indoors, around defined zones, using, for example, Bluetooth, which have a long range, or some radio frequency ID tags, and the near field, which is what you use when you touch payment with a credit card. So there's a lot of different ways to to track and location of something. Excuse me. So this is a way of tracking through discoverable mobile phones, and this uses fixed Wi-Fi hubs and Bluetooth beacons to create kind of a geofence inside an area, and when a discoverable mobile phone goes into that area, it can pick it up. So it's completely anonymised way of understanding flow through spaces. Urban Control is a company that produces smart lighting, and we work with them. They wanted an easy method to understand how to capture people flow through stations, and their interest was how to disperse large crowds using smart lighting. And because our personal devices like phones have embedded GPS, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connection capabilities, they are trackable in an anonymised way. And the data can be networked into other IoT devices, for example, dynamic signage. So you can pre-program that to provide a real-time alert or guide to people in that space, if they're detected. So this is another example of tracking objects using a mobile phones, but here we've coupled the mobile phone with a tag, a Bluetooth tag, where the phone acts as the GPS location and provides the bridge between that and the tag, which could be on, for example, a piece of luggage. And then loads of products out there now, you'll find them all on the internet. One of the biggest applications is baggage. And this approach is being adopted now by airlines offering baggage tracking services to travellers. But this spin-off benefit's not the real reason why they're tracking baggage. In 2018, almost 25 million bags were mislaid, and I've been at the other end of that, and it's not fun, by airlines. So that's nearly 40 bags lost en route every minute, which is massive. So the International Air Transport Association now has required airlines to implement an end-to-end baggage programme, which required an IoT-based solution. So how they're doing it is super low-cost RFID tags on bags, and they install a geofence within the airport, and the antenna pick up the bags as they move through that space. They share the information with the passengers, and they can correct in real time any potential incidents, and they're using it to predict where disruptions might occur.
7 minutes left, Rachel.
Right, thank you. So a word about RFID. It's quite a mature technology, but it's also advancing in many ways as well through miniaturization and sophistication. There's a huge range of forms you can get for RFID, embedded in many different materials. So, for example, a laundry tag will withstand high temperatures and frequent wash cycles, and they're low cost. I think tracking in general is going to transform businesses going forward, for sure. And talking about the future, this is something that's being developed by Vodafone. It's a printable RFID tag machine. It's using disposable and dissolvable components such as the antennae, the eSIM, and the battery. And what they're going to be using that for is when you break a seal, immediately that tag starts to transmit its location, and if something's been, like a package or something has been opened. And you can, and that's for use in next generation mobile networks. So just coming towards the end of the slides now, this is a really interesting example of next generation kind of tracking with intelligence, and this is called Edge of Shelf. There's a US company called Perch has developed this, and the system knows which product is being looked at, using a robust machine vision integrated into point of sale. So say this example, it's a high-end spirit. The content's activated when you pick up a particular brand, and it triggers that screen, and it's a touch screen, but it's not really an advert. It provides kind of a deeper content from influencers that try and give you a little bit more deeper information about the product. You can check out without going to the cashier on this. The cashier can come to you, and early use of it shown real efficiencies and improvements in sales. But you can see how you could apply this to crafts, other high-end food and drink, and these kind of technologies going forward as well. So talking about, Bluetooth beacons and pushed information, this is another low-cost proximity-based content push, and this is really providing the case for proximity-driven content. The examples taken from Mobile World Congress in 2015, where the evidence that if you do have an app that's dedicated for a particular event, and you're able to send push information to that when people walk by and trigger a beacon, maybe from an exhibitor, then you do get more engagement, you get more people clicking through to content, rather than just aimlessly wandering through. So it's quite a powerful tool to use, and that's been widely adopted now as well. So this is coming to the end of my slide deck. So this is really just a takeaway to show it's really never been easier to set up and visualize in software applications information about anything really that can be measured by a sensor. Some of these sensor developer kits are less than £30, and they really are super easy to pop up. You have a sentiment button there as well. They can be linked to these low power wide area networks. And just a couple of months ago, we now saw the first end-to-end kind of IoT kits being sold by Amazon, about £1,500. Those two examples, one is an asset tracking kit, the other one is a smart building, and that includes the devices plus the dashboard and everything in between. So as I said, they're first to market with those. And finally, if you are interested in asset and people tracking, our virtual coffees, the next one on the 10th of December is all about that. So please do register if that's of interest. We have a number of guides about getting started, and of course, supporting projects. And we're really keen to collaborate and support projects in tourism, as many as possible. So thank you very much. That's my contact details. Drop us a line anytime. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, Rachel. We've got some questions, but we'll keep them till the end. So now I'd like to introduce Josh Ryan Saha from Traveltech for Scotland, and looking forward to hearing from him. On you go, Josh. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm just getting my slides up. Just bear with me 1 second. Leslie, can you confirm that you can see them?
Yes, I can.
Great. So yeah, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. As Leslie already mentioned, I'm a director at Traveltech for Scotland, but also I work at the University of Edinburgh around data-driven innovation and tourism and festivals. I recognise many of you in the attendee list already today, so it's great to have some friendly faces. And if you haven't heard me speak or haven't had the chance to chat as well, I look forward to hopefully collaborating in the future as well. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit today is a bit of a framework that I think works around where IoT and the data coming from it can be useful, then a load of examples, and then following up, hopefully a bit of a sort of trigger to get started, because I know that there's been a lot of events, there's a lot of talk around this, and many of you want to get started with projects. So the first thing, and if you have heard me speak before, you've seen this slide before. I used to work in an organisation called Nesta. When I was there was a guy there who worked called Eddie Copeland, and he was looking at how data could be used in local government specifically. And when he was working there, he came up with this sort of framework. And rather than a process, which it does kind of show, I started to see it more as a tick box. And the way I think about it is, to get a sort of project going, especially with IoT and sensors and data, you kind of want to be ticking each of these things to know that it's worth your time and that it's something that can focus you on something that's going to be useful. The first thing is, have you got a specific problem, something that you know is a challenge for you and that you want to resolve? And as part of that, that there's an action that is within your ability, with your remit, with your sort of decision rights to take, and that you, if you had that information, you would be able to make that decision, take that action. The third part is, what would you need to see, or what could you see on a screen potentially in front of you that will enable you to then make that action? And then where or what type of data could you start to capture that will then power what you would want to see in front of you on a screen? Think, I can make that decision now. And if I can make that decision, it helps me resolve this specific problem. So I always like to use this. It's a great framework to help us think, to narrow down the use cases in which you could be using this sort of technology. So onto the use cases. The first one I'm going to mention is a little project that's been going on within Edinburgh at the moment around Greyfriars Kirkyard. If you know it, it's a very, very it's a historical site in Scotland of huge value culturally, historically, and it's become really, really busy. It's become really busy in part because of Harry Potter, and there are a couple of grave sites, the Tom Riddle grave, the McGonagall grave, which are known, or at least known to be part of the inspiration for characters within Harry Potter. And what has happened has been a huge explosion in the number of people visiting, and that's led to some challenges. Some of the site itself gets a bit overrun. Some of the grass gets muddied. Some of the infrastructure gets broken, and they want to put in place, there's a lot of litter and other things like that as well. They want to put in place a way of being able to try and fix this. But the first problem was just knowing how many people went. The site is open to everybody because it's, of course, it's a kirkyard. So they just wanted to count and then be able to come up with some sort of justification or business case to get more funding to look after the site, but also to start potentially understanding the behavior in the site. And then the final thing is help potentially put registration around the visitors, the tour guides, so that it's not inundated all the time. It can be managed in a better way. Potentially even think about donation points where people could tap their card. So what the council have done recently is they've put on some battery-powered sensors. They're counting how many people are coming through at both gates. And the first step is just saying, well, we're getting million plus visitors a year. We need to be doing more. Look at the times, dates, when's it more busy, and then start liaising with the tour guides. So that's one example. Another is, again, Wilderness Centres. I think they might be on the call. Great company, and they worked with Historic Environment Scotland, who are also on the call, to just do the same sort of thing. A lot of unmanned rural sites that are maintained by Historic Environment Scotland, wanting to know how many people are going, what is the frequency, what is the busyness, and why is that useful? Well, it means that if there is a lot of people visiting, maybe the maintenance scheduling could be increased, or maybe there does need to be a manned presence. Perhaps it could be useful to know that it's popular, and then we can start using it in marketing materials. Whole range of interesting use cases there. And Wilderness Centres, a great Scottish travel tech company to think about. So museums and galleries. Well, this is another place, another sector that is huge potential. The example I tend to use is one from the Art Institute of Chicago. And what they used were sort of Wi-Fi beacons that would understand and track the movement of people using those beacons. To do two. One would be looking at the flow between the different rooms, and then a different solution looking at the sort of fine resolution of movement within a particular room. And what that would do, it starts to indicate the dwell time that people would have in front of specific artworks. That's useful because it tells you what's popular, what isn't popular, or what is potentially placed in a really high throughput way, and what is perhaps a bit more hidden and perhaps could benefit from a little bit more profile within the gallery. And this was used to good effect. They found that a particular exhibit, a Degas exhibit, was really, really popular. Particular paintings within that exhibit were really, really popular. Huge dwell time. Incorporated that into the marketing, and then that increased the amount of people coming back. It was a good use of data because what it showed what was popular, triggered a decision, which is people like it. Let's tell people about it, more people. Let's get more people into this paying exhibit. So that's one example of ways that data and sensors could be used for museums and galleries. And there are other ways, and we've been speaking to partners, potentially the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, around how that sort of movement data within attractions could be useful. So one way could be through donation points. Briefly mentioned it before, but if you were to do a bit of experiment, you have these contactless donation points. You put them where there's specifically, there's a lot of high footfall, and then you start to track how many people are donating, and then those sort of transactions, if you start putting them in different places and seeing if it makes any change, then you can potentially increase your donation count. The other part is development, and where you could perhaps put new buildings, new cafes, new services, is a part of the museum or gallery or attraction at the moment getting less than other places. And why? So if you realise that a big wing of the museum is for some reason not getting the footfall you'd want, perhaps it requires better signage. Perhaps it requires a different type of entrance, or you realise there's a big place where there's a lot of dwell time again. Maybe that's a place where you could put in a cafe and again try and increase revenue. So at the University of Edinburgh, we are working on a great little project, and it's great to say that the lead on this project, Ricardo, is on the webinar as well. And what Ricardo is doing with colleagues at the University of Edinburgh Business School is starting to understand the visitor flow using sensors, trying to identify the best sensor solution, and then track and see how people move within attractions. And one of those is camera obscura, a very tight site, and in better times when we had a significant tourism industry and people coming in from all around the world before the pandemic, it was very, very popular. But what Andrew and the team wanted there was to maintain that high quality visitor experience. And to do that, they really wanted to understand the dynamics of people moving around that tight site. So that is one of the projects we're looking at, which sensor we can put in place that understand how people are moving through, and then maybe put in place better sort of time slot management, or having staff at different points of the camera obscura to help move people along, or help manage it and moderate it as well. So that's an interesting example of a project we've got going. I'll mention it again, but actually we've got space in this project for partners. So if you're interested in visitor flow and you want to be part of this, then you can certainly get in touch with me and potentially get a chance to work with Ricardo on doing some of this right away. So getting started. So on the sort of visitor flow a bit of work, a friend of mine, he used to work in finance, doing big trading deals and all that sort of stuff. And he decided, I'm getting out of it. I'm getting out of a rat race. And he went over to Tough Mudder, and he used some of his financial transaction work and his big data analytics to think about how Tough Mudder, the sort of adventure race system, could be improved. And he was looking at observing one of the races and seeing there was a lot of inefficiencies. Sometimes it was getting too busy. People were waiting and queuing to get over the big wall or to go under these particular tunnels. So what he did was put some wearable RFID chips, I think, into the tags that you get around the arms, and he was starting to understand, based on who it was and the flow going through the site, where the blockages happened and what type of people were perhaps causing the blockages, and started to both redesign the routes, but also some sort of timed starting points so that it could flow a lot better, people's experience. Although, of course, terrible trying to do a Tough Mudder, was also better in terms of you're not queuing around, you're still just racing, you know, trying to, I wouldn't do one of these things, but trying to sort of compete and have a more enjoyable, or can't figure the right term, but engaging experience, I guess. Another example of wearables was actually in San Francisco. I think it was the Museum of Innovation. They used wearables for a particular exhibition where everyone had put a sort of monitor around their heart rate and things like that, and as you walk through that exhibition, it was all sort of shown on live screens, a sort of collective health of the exhibit's viewers. The interesting thing was actually people kept those monitors on and then would experience the rest of the Museum of Innovation, and that insight was quite useful in trying to see what's actually how people physically responding to the artifacts. I think you'd certainly need good consent to do that.
10 minutes left, Josh.
Of course, yeah. So other ways that movement has been tracked at city level in Amsterdam, very, very popular attractions, of course. They started to look at some of the sensors from city Wi-Fi, but also some of the sensors that are being tracked through our phones already, to start to understand the flow of people and how they move across the city. And especially around when you have a combination of things happening, a football game, as well as peak tourism season, as well as another couple of events, and how they could use that data to incentivize movement or different types of time slot booking. So everyone would usually go to this museum first, and actually that was probably not the best way of doing it. You could perhaps moderate that in better ways. So they started analyzing the typical flows that people would take between museums, and then started putting in things like incentivized pricing, or would just get in touch with the hotel concierges and say, tell your guests today, don't go here first, go here. So, you know, sometimes quite manual interventions, but all based on Internet of Things, data, making a decision, and then trying to change behavior. At the University of Edinburgh again, and Ms. Benedek, Rosenboretsky and Dr. Rick Sarkar started working on a project looking at Wi-Fi sensors in Edinburgh to look at how did, during the festivals, actually in June and July, it's not the Fringe or International, but the film and the film festival and jazz, and how people moved across the city. Again, looking at the Wi-Fi points, never anyone's personal data. This is just over some days, looking at the busyness and how people would flow through. Now, why was that interesting for us for a project this year? Well, we started modeling that with infection spread. And the yellow dots you can see here will give an indication where you might get infection spread surges based on that previous mobility data. So that's another area of this data has been used. So the call I was on just before this meeting was actually with East Lothian and a part of the University of Edinburgh called Edina, and we were trying to work out how we could look at occupancy problems. And in Malaga, they have a beach busyness sort of index, and they have a dashboard to show you, okay, beach Z is really busy at this moment. Maybe you should go to the beach just down the road, all based on the sensors and picking up where people are on those specific beaches, and then coming up with a nice dashboard that would say, you know, this one's too busy, go here. And what we're trying to do is look at East Lothian. So usually 3 million visitors a year. This year was 4 million visitors. Now, we often think that tourism has had a major hit, and of course it has, especially for international visitors this year. But some places have benefited. The problems were that some of these places got too busy on East Lothian, and the way that they manage some of these sensitive environmental sites is through the car parks. So what we're looking at the moment with them is how can we do a project measuring car park occupancy and then alerting people early on and early enough to change the behavior. So if it's this beach is full, go there. All the beaches are full. Maybe you should be going into the towns. Maybe you should be trying something different. Maybe National Museum of Flight. Maybe some of the agri-tourism offer that's there as well. Purchasing and maintenance is another area which is a little bit different. Many of you have heard of what Fishers have done, where they put RFID chips into some of the bed sheets, and that was really useful in understanding the life cycle of a bed sheet and seeing which products have a longer life cycle and they've improved for purchasing. Another area is maintenance. When I was at the data lab, we did a lot of predictive maintenance work where you would put sensors on big generators and things like that, start to be able to look at when machines or generators started to potentially fail based on the patterns in the data. And then you could see those patterns occurring again. You could actually get in there before that machine would fail because you could see that it was going to happen. A bit of predictive maintenance is interesting. Very quickly, just go on to experiences. I'm going to move on slightly from this one, but go on to this one instead. When I was in Helsinki a couple of years ago, it was great when we could travel internationally. There was a great group called Team Lab coming out of Japan that would use light sensors that if you could touch the wall, even if it was a projected light, it would create an instant reaction and new flowers would bloom. And I thought that was just an amazing example of sort of light and sensors and then producing a whole new experience. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I just recommend that you look at the YouTube videos of Team Lab because it is just some wonderful stuff. So 3 key points. Data. So you get the sensor, depending on the complexity of what you want to do, you actually need to process that data so that you can turn it into something that's useful. Depending on the complexity, there may be a need for you to work with partners to do the data processing part, because it can be challenging. A lot of the sensor companies can do that already, but some, depending on what you're trying to do, might need, again, to collaborate with perhaps universities or different data analytics companies. This here is an example of movement within a small factory, and you can see the data is messy. It's looking at specific components of a production cycle. So data processing means sometimes you need to collaborate with partners. Ethics. You need to think about the way you're capturing that data. Is it something that is ethical? You don't want to be capturing everyone's identity. Equally, if you're using a camera and still perhaps destroying that information quickly so that it can never be known or seen, the perception might still look a bit off. Also, I think at destination level, we need to think about how do we collaborate using data. The West Highland Way is a really good example, and around how this is a whole suite of organisations that benefit from understanding this knowledge. And understanding how people move across a destination in tourism is particularly interesting. Again, with the East Lothian example, what is happening across multiple sites, and how the businesses and organizations collaborate in a smart way and in a way that potentially cooperate, so that everyone can see what's happening. So thinking about the sort of business models or the collaborative models that you have to try and get something going. So just a reminder on this, hopefully some of these projects will show you ways to navigate this particular field of Internet of Things and tourism. And if you want to get something going, try and tick all of these boxes first, get a good conception of what you want to do, what type of data you want to capture, whether there's ways you can capture it, seek advice from people like Censis and Rachel and the amazing team there. So my final thing is, Traveltech for Scotland as an organisation, myself and Leslie really want to help you just get these things started. We'll do what it takes. If you've got an interesting idea, you want to get something going, then get in touch with us. We'll meet with you. We'll try and bring people together. If it requires funding, there may be the funding routes. We know that on occasion, and when something is particularly innovative, I know that Censis in the past have funded things. There's other projects and funding routes as well. Of course, partners, like I said, around data processing. If you've got those partners lined up, then brilliant. We've got RGU talking next, who are a fantastic partner to work with on any occasion. And let's get started. I think we've talked a lot about IoT and tourism in the last year. I know that many of you on this call want to get something going. I think the time is right. So we're really keen to get started and want to work with you as well. So thank you so much for listening to me. I hope that wasn't too much. And I really look forward to hearing the next talk.
Thank you, Josh. On time as well. Very impressive. Thanks very much. Yeah, as Josh says, so between the three of us, between Censis, Interface, and Traveltech for Scotland, we're very open to helping you if you do have ideas. And so, yeah, even if you just want to chat further, then please do get in touch. So, equally important is our digital innovation, particularly now more than ever, and that's why we're keen to hear from our final speaker, Chris Moule, who's Head of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Robert Gordon University. So lovely to hear from you, Chris. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. As Leslie said, my name is Chris Moule. I'm the Head of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Robert Gordon University. Although I do feel like I'm reading the news on STV today because of the backdrop. This isn't a virtual backdrop. This is a real backdrop. It's not all about digital tech. We actually have something physical here. So I'm in the university. I'm business upstairs and quite casual downstairs. I've got my Adidas trainers on, but I thought I'd dress up a bit smarter today for you as I'm not at home. It's great to be asked again by Interface, and thank you to Leslie, Heather and Alina for asking me to do this. I spoke at an Interface event a few months ago, and I obviously did something right because they invited me back to speak, but it's also great to see such a diverse audience. I think we've got people from Braemar Castle, the Cairngorms National Park, there's people from Skye, Forres, Aberdeen. I'm sure there's people from the Central Belt down the borders as well. So it's great to have that diverse. And so I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to change tack a little bit and look at how companies and organizations can substantially and systematically embed innovation in their organizations. I'm not an academic. I don't work in the business school. I'm the head of innovation and entrepreneurship, and I work across the whole university. And my job is really to inspire and foster innovation, not just in the university, amongst the students, the staff and the graduates, but also in the region as well. And we work with a number of partners in that, including Interface, including Censis, Data Lab, Opportunity Northeast as well. So there's a number of partners that are all part of this ecosystem that we're trying to develop. But yeah, I thought it was important to be on brand today. So it's not moving, and I'll move that there. So most of you will recognize who this is. This is Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs said that it was more fun to be a pirate than to join the Navy. And what he was highlighting there was the fact that companies, particularly large companies, large organizations, are very slow to change. And they're very slow to respond to change, to respond to disruption, than smaller companies and startups. And many of you would have heard it, it's the oil tanker v the speedboat conundrum. Because the bureaucracy in many established organizations inadvertently is designed to create inertia. And that's not very helpful in a volatile and uncertain and changing environment, particularly like the one that we're in at the moment. It's a very complex world. And it's hard to innovate in some of these established organizations. You'll recognize this. The ones that want to be innovators, the entrepreneurs, are often have to deal with the politics, the lack of resource, the inertia that they feel. So they're faced with this paradox that they want to innovate for the future, but how do they do it while continuing to run the core business that you have? And it's often the management of the core business that gets in the way of that innovation. And it's really important. So innovation often struggles as it often remains outside of the current system that you have. And that's called the innovator's dilemma. So how should existing firms innovate when the model that you have developed in your organizations, and rightly so, the structures, the processes, the way in which you make money, are all focused on keeping you in business? They're not focused on innovating. But of course, we know, and many of you will recognize this in yourselves, that you're very entrepreneurial. There are innovators. There are entrepreneurial management and entrepreneurial employees who are constantly trying to innovate. Sometimes they're known as kind of disruptive rebels, and some people might be just a pain in the backside. But these entrepreneurs often see the future coming, and they're passionate, and we need to support that passion because they're passionate about your organization and about ensuring that it can survive, and not just survive, but also thrive into the future. So for innovation to really succeed in organizations, they need to become part of the structure and part of the processes in these organizations. They can no longer be these one-off projects. So how do we make these repeatable processes and help our companies to survive and continuously grow? Let me just have a quick look at tourism, because that's been really challenged. Innovation in tourism has many faces. It can involve process innovation, the way in which we deliver the services in tourism. It can be logistical innovation, new ways to supply products and services to our customers, or it can be market innovation, focusing on new ways of marketing and consumer behavior. And of course, for much of 2020, the pandemic has stopped us not only visiting other households and our loved ones, but also from traveling to different locations, both at home and abroad. And this has had a devastating effect, as you'll know, on the travel and tourism industry. I read somewhere the other day that the global revenue has dropped by 42% from the figure in 2019. So it's huge, almost half. And so the impact has just touched numbers of communities who rely on tourism for survival, as well as multiple travel companies who have had to shut down. However, we still see these pockets of innovation, and we still see people that want to be innovative in their industries, which is fantastic. Here's an example of one. This is in the Faroe Islands, which is a Denmark territory. And they've come up with a way to allow people around the world to go on these self-guided tours through their mobile of the archipelago. Camera-wearing locals respond to sightseeing commands. So they wear the cameras, and then they respond to sightseers' commands from the people in their own home, allow for this kind of virtual tourist to control the route using this app. The tour guide also provides commentary around the area as well. So that's one innovation. Another one that I've seen recently is this French cabin equipment supplier, Safran Aero Systems. They've partnered with a British seating designer called Universal Movement to create this origami seat on airplanes that makes partitions around economy class seats. It's called the Interspace Comfort System, and it features 2 wings with the seat back so that they can be unfolded to offer that lateral support and also prevent movement. It leaves the middle seat free, vacant, creating that privacy barrier between the 2 other seats on either side. So not a technology innovation, but innovation nonetheless. So this is all great, but as Joshua said, where do we start? How do we go about starting? And what I want you to take away from my presentation today, because this is the season of giving, I want to give you something, is I want you to think, if we have all these ideas, the Internet of Things, the digital, the apps, the new business models, new processes, products, services, and throw them up against the wall, we don't know which one's going to stick. And so what I want to do is to give you a very simple model that you can use to begin to triage all these ideas and use this model to embed innovation into your organizations, to drive innovation and to grow the organization. Starting point, I want to share with you some innovation myths. So before we jump in, let's just highlight 4 myths that stop business owners turning ideas into reality, into real products and services that are going to have an impact for your customers. The first one is that the most important part of innovator's journey is to find the perfect idea. The exploration journey calls for innovation leaders to adapt ideas iteratively and constantly test, adapt, and test again until you have sufficient evidence through the value proposition to the customer. The second myth is that a small number of big bets will lead to large returns. Early on, and you'll probably resonate with this, no one knows what ideas are going to work. And so what we need to do is invest small amounts of time in lots of ideas and look for evidence to emerge and support those ones that come through, but it's evidence-based. And then you either make decisions to persevere with the idea, to abandon it, or to pivot it. And I'll come on to that in a second. Thirdly, skills for creating and exploring new ideas are similar to those for managing them. You'll see shortly when I give you the examples, is that they're radically different and they radically require a different set of skills in the explore and exploit part of it. Explorers need to deal with high level of uncertainty, and people that are exploiting in the existing organization need to be excellent at execution and working with certain amounts of certainty, monitoring, measuring the return on investment. And finally, innovation teams are renegades and out to disrupt. We need to see innovators as partners in our organizations because they're essential to the future. They need to be able to access space in the strategy, space in the budgets, not necessarily physical space, but possibly physical space as well. Also space and structure. How many of your organizations have a chief innovation officer on your board or part of your management team? And if they aren't there, then you might want to consider putting one on. So this is the model. It's called Explore, Exploit. It's a new model that's been developed by a strategizer. And I want to introduce you to it because it's a way that you as business leaders can systematically drive innovation in your organization. So what we do in this model is we separate the new exploratory activities of your business, of your people, of your departments from the existing businesses that exploits the products and services. And what each of these has is different cultures, different structures, different processes. And as senior managers in your organization, you are the link between the two. You have the oversight across both of them. And it's an ambidextrous type of organization. It provides a practical and proven model for forward-looking leaders to seek pioneering new ideas. So in the Explore, we focus on searching for the new ideas, products and services, the value propositions that are going to support you into the future, and possibly new business models that you're looking at. But in Exploit, we center on keeping the existing organization or business model on that trajectory of growth where we scale those ideas, we actually launch production opportunities, and we improve returns and value. And as I said, they're very different. In this slide, I want to outline the major differences between the two. Exploring and exploiting do need separation. in your thinking and in your application, because it's this ambidextrous design that you need. And the challenge for managers and leaders in these organizations is to create and manage and harmonize what are quite often two antagonistic cultures under one roof. Because what you need is a strong explore and exploit culture simultaneously. You'll probably all be aware of people that have got constantly new ideas and new innovations and new products and transformational thinking. And what managers need to do is we need to balance them with those people who are in the explore one, those people who excel at and cherish the execution and the measurement and the key objectives and looking for return on investment. And it's important, you all know people who that is, it might even be yourself. You need to think how, as managers, we can ensure that they work harmoniously together. So in the exploration phase, organizations need to turn ideas into value propositions that customers care about. And in exploration, it requires you having a number of small bets that you reduce over time based on evidence until you get the winners, if you like. So on the x-axis here, of the exploration model is the potential return to organizations. And you can see there, it's low potential return, high potential return. And this is the potential return that you would expect to see if you are successful with your innovation. And of course, as managers, you can decide how you measure that return. So for a number of you, it might be financial. It doesn't have to be. It could be revenue. It could be profit margins. In a health setting, it might be waiting times. It could be the number of beds. It could be something around staff retention. In education, it might be student experience or the number of students that are coming to the university. It could be something about carbon reduction. You might want to focus on more social impacts or environmental returns, but it must align closely to your strategy. Whatever your overarching strategy is, it must align closely to that, because the more that you increase, the more the potential return is, and the closer it aligns to your strategy. If it doesn't align to your strategy, then it will be lower down on the axis. On the y-axis, on the x-axis here, the one going horizontally, it's innovation risk. What you're trying to do here is you're trying to reduce the risk, the innovation risk. And it goes here from high risk to low risk. So again, we're trying to move up the trajectory to the top right-hand corner. And there are 4 risks, innovation risks, that can kill your idea. And you need to measure your idea against all of these. The first one is desirability. Customers just aren't interested. No one desires it. The market's too small. There are too few customers. You're not able to reach the customers. The second one is feasibility. Can you manage a scale? Do you have the technical feasibility to deliver and develop this product, even with your partners? Do you have the access to the skills and the key resources, the technology, the intellectual property, the key activities and the partners? If it's yes, then you're de-risking. Thirdly, viability. This is commercial viability. Are the costs too high? Is it not going to generate enough revenue to give you a good ROI? Or maybe the customers just won't pay for it. And then adaptability. As we're in operating in such a rapidly changing environment, are you able to adapt quickly? Can you adapt and adjust to your environment? Is the macroeconomic environment, the macro technology environment, are they viable to support your business? So how do we move along that trajectory? What's the strategy for moving along the exploration trajectory? Remember, this is still ideas, we're not executing yet. So first of all, you need to design to improve returns and strategic alignment, and constantly test and build evidence. I'm going to talk about this a lot, getting the evidence to de-risk it. So designing it, the product or the service, is turning those vague ideas, insights, and evidence into concrete products and services. And it focuses on maximizing the returns that you want and aligning to that strategic direction. So that's that way. Testing is around coming up with some hypotheses and testing them, conducting experiments, developing prototypes. I think it was Rachel said that the internet IoT kits were from Amazon. You could buy them now. So that's about prototyping. That's about developing those prototypes and building evidence to either support or refute your ideas. The search trajectory starts with discovery, where you reduce risks through testing. Do your customers care? Are they willing to pay for your service? So you need to go and speak to the customers as you begin to validate and accelerate. And you might find that you pivot, and I'll come on to that just now. So these are the various actions that you can perform as you navigate your Explore portfolio of ideas, your products, your services, and the orange dots represent them. So first of all, we ideate. This is usually in the form of workshops. You can do this with partners. I know Censis will do it. Opportunity Northeast, Scottish Enterprise Interface will all support you with ideation. You can have accelerator programs as we do in the university, or innovation challenges. And at this stage, it's only assumptions that need to be validated. And what we need to do is get evidence, and that ideation should continue as you move up. At point B, this is where you decide to persevere. You've got that insight after talking to your potential customers. We get confidence from the analysis, and we further test and stay on course. At point C, that's when you make the decision whether to move into the exploitation. There's strong evidence of desirability, strong evidence of viability, strong evidence of adaptability. But the challenge now is to find a good home in the existing organization, because what you need to do is make recommendations for execution, how you can improve it and how you can scale it in the existing organization. Sometimes you might pivot. I said that before. The idea might need a significant change. So this is point D, and this often happens when evidence is few or far between. There aren't enough customers. The original idea is too technically challenging. Costs are too high. So you might need to come back to some earlier evidence and pivot. And then, of course, you might come to a stage where the idea is a promising one, but it's better served outside the traditional company, outside the organization. It doesn't fit with the organizational strategy. And so this is where you might spin out or transfer out the idea, possibly into another organization, possibly into give it to the inventors that invented it if they want to take it away, or maybe there's investors that want to invest in it, but it moves outside the company. And sometimes a pivot might not make sense. The best course of action might be to kill an idea. And this is what we do in the exploration phase. We kill ideas early. If it's not working, we talk about fail fast and move on. Because if you don't kill an idea, you could be spending a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of resources working on ideas as you move up this trajectory. If it's not working for you, you need to kill it fast and get rid of it. And that's point F. So retire it. I've spoken a lot about evidence and insight, gathering evidence to support or refute the hypothesis that you're making around these ideas. The more experiments you run, the more evidence you have, the stronger it is and the more confidence that you will get. So evidence first, that is the data that you'll generate from your experiments. The fact that you've got these customer discussions, you might have some quotes, you're looking at their behaviors, orders, purchases, and these can be either weak or strong, as outlined on this slide. The insights that you get is what you learn from the evidence. It's the searching for the truth. It's searching for those patterns of behavior. And does that validate your hypothesis or not? Or maybe it provides a new direction that you want to go in. Insights provide what I call these solid foundations to make the informed decisions for action. How strong is the evidence for you and how much confidence does it give you? Just quickly, I want to move on to the exploitation side of it. Because once you've got that robust evidence of desirability, feasibility, viability, and adaptability, and it aligns with your organization's strategy and has good potential returns in terms of profit, customer satisfaction, or whatever's key for your own organization, we then move it into the exploitation phase, where we start the execution process. And this is where, for the first time, it actually becomes a reality. And you look to constantly improve and scale it. Because here, what we want to do is boost its potential of higher returns. But we also need to protect it. We need to protect it from disruption as well. And the way you do this is to undertake an assessment on the environment of how it might be disrupted. You need to build a resilient model around it when you start to exploit it and look at trends. Is that market growing? Is the competition shrinking? What barriers to entry can we create? Is the technology moving in the right direction for us? Are there new regulations which are going to help us to protect it? And so think about how you can boost and protect it once it moves into that phase. In this phase, you need clear planning, you need clear implementation strategies. You're focused on monitoring the success, good budgeting, good measurement, good return on investment measurement, and the variance to the plan. So these are different skills that you need in terms of the managers that you're looking for to execute this. Remember, the focus is on culture and skills that are required here. They're very different from the exploration culture. So just some final thoughts from me. When considering innovation in the hospitality and tourism industry, I think the importance of loyal and local customers in the recovery from the pandemic is crucial. It's very important to consider because they are great sources of innovation. Obviously, we're seeing companies that are receiving less support from the government or from their landlords. We're constantly threatened by longer lockdowns, so it's having a massive impact on bars and restaurants and hotels. And many have got, responsible for employees. And there's lots of examples of how the industry is innovating. And I think that both loyal and local customers provide that psychological safety, which support your organizations to innovate, because there's some real depth in the personal relationships that you have, and they can support and contribute to that business model innovation, to the innovations that you're seeking. And they can be supportive throughout the process, the explore process, as partners in its implementation. They can provide you with feedback, with evidence. They are your early adopters, your early users. And I think that there have been a number of incredible innovations, but in most cases, I think the innovators have often had limited financial opportunities, limited capacities, and this is something you might be aware of. And so they're only ever incremental innovations. They're kind of one-offs, if you like, compared to some of the more radical innovations that we've seen. And of course, destinations are all competing with each other and often perceived by tourists as actually being a bundle of packages. And coming back to what Joshua said before, I think there's a real opportunity for firms and companies in this industry to work cooperatively. And I see an increasing important form of innovation is open innovation, which compared to that traditional in-house innovation can be inspired by your customers and external stakeholders. I think this form of innovation is still in its infancy in the tourism and hospitality sector. And I think that we should look at how we can develop and implement a culture and process that helps us to systematically follow an open innovation approach, where conceptually it's more distributed, there's more participation, it's very decentralized, because the useful knowledge that you have in your organizations can be widely distributed to support others. And I think that it's more challenging for companies on their own to innovate effectively. And it's probably more profitable to innovate as part of a cooperative. It reduces your costs, it accelerates the time to market, and you can create new revenue streams. So I would certainly advocate how we can engender and foster and inspire open innovation throughout the industry. That is the end of my talk. I hope you've got some points to take away with you. I'm happy to, as the other speakers are, to take any questions. I think it's been really interesting to hear from Rachel, who I've known for a long time at Censis, and Joshua as well. The way that Joshua managed to pivot from Tough Mudder to beaches of Malaga, I thought was fantastic. So I look forward to receiving your questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. So lots of really good points there. And as we're all, so many of us are having to adapt what we're offering, who our audiences and our customers and visitors are. So there's a lot of useful information there. And thanks to all our speakers, to Rachel, Josh, and Chris. Rachel, can I ask you to put your camera on again, if that's okay? We have had some questions coming through. Most of them have been answered so far on IoT. I'm just looking at one from Murray from Cairngorms National Park. He says, thanks a lot, great content from all the speakers. In Cairngorms National Park, we've been working over the last 3 to 4 months with IoT Scotland, North, formerly Boston Networks, Wilderness Centres, and local landowners. Cairngorm, Glenmore, Aviemore areas are key visitor hotspot. We hope to get this in place over the next few months. Currently negotiation about installation of gateways and purchase of sensors. I like the open innovation idea. We would appreciate any help, collaboration we can get. We are all learning fast and it's a steep curve. So he says he'll be in touch. That's really, really good to hear. And of course, we would love to, chat to you further. Has anyone else got any questions for our panelists? Because I know that myself and I think some of my colleagues have. Here's one from Alistair Danter from Sky Connect. it's easy to take on board new ideas. It's harder to get rid of old ideas. Old ideas often stop new ideas working. So yeah, observation. Yeah, very true, Alistair. Very true. Rachel, can I ask you about going back to some of the metrics? I don't think you were able to show that slide in your presentation today, but there's some really impressive metrics in terms of the impact that using IoT can have. Are you able to share that with us?
Yeah, this was really on the proximity content one, and that was where you have your Bluetooth beacons and your phones. And so I was just a bit conscious of time, so I have a slew of examples here. So in terms of apps, those enabled for proximity-driven content, generally some of the figures I've picked up are the 235% more engaging. So these apps are used more often than a standard mobile app that you might get, about an exhibition or a place. And then the data that you share can be used to create relevant content for an individual. So there were some examples, and Josh had some examples in museums, but I remember reading one as well where you can, proximity-driven information. So you're in a museum, you have the app there, and you're engaged in an exhibit of some kind. And then that interaction picks up your interest. And there's some museums are looking at ways of providing that visitor with more information, perhaps from exhibits that are not on display, that are maybe in the stock or the store, or maybe information about from other museums as well. So it's kind of a whole area that I'm not expert in, but I was really interested in seeing how that could create reach through and help build somebody's interest and perhaps inform future exhibits as well. So so they had a look at that. They found that Bluetooth worked better than the GPS to drive people to click through on the content. People that usually use a GPS are using it for a mapping function rather than an actual interaction or information function. And the Mobile World Congress, they found that 47% of mobile users interacted with the app at the venue, and that's a 240% more than the best usage rate of a mobile app for similar events. And the users opened it 26 times a day on average. And there were some others ones at a PGE Sports Arena in Gdansk. Directors users around the stadium prompted emoticon sharing when things happen in a game, and 83% of users clicked on the beacon triggered messages that were linked to that. So they could have been about promotions and things like that as well from vendors. Icon in Prague, they gamified a visit there, encouraging visitors to visit exhibitors to visit gadgets and souvenirs, and that had a 65% uplift in app use for that. And the TEDx, this is a reduction in printing cost by 45% by beacon enabled content, but that's a kind of an obvious application of an electronic kind of information. So there was some really good, compelling, massive uplifts there of the use of some of these proximity-driven IoT.
Thank you. That's great. Heather, do you have a question for Chris? Sorry. I know it's
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a bit of a question just thinking about the response to the pandemic and the recent environment. Just have you seen a kind of increase in businesses looking for support? And yeah, have they been, I know that you've presented quite a bit around business models, or have they been quite sector focused?
We have. I think, obviously companies at the moment are trying to survive, more than anything. I think there's a real look at how they survive, and that's the focus, particularly when people are losing their jobs and livelihoods. But I think that people are realizing that the current business model, and what we've seen actually is that a number of businesses have pivoted their business model without even knowing. They wouldn't call it a business model. They'd basically just say, our customers are now online, we need to move online, basically. And so that has implications across their whole kind of business model canvas. It's the way the relationship with the customers, it's the way they use their supply chain, it's the way that their cost base is completely shifted. And so they've just kind of got on with that. They haven't kind of mapped that out. They've just kind of got on with it. I think it would be an interesting project to begin to map that out, because there are ways that people can shift their business models. And I think what we're seeing is that companies who are struggling and know that they need to shift their business model, they need to do something different, otherwise they're going to go out of business. They're the ones that have been approaching us to say, well, this is my current business model. This is how I currently create value for these customers. Can you help me look at other opportunities, maybe look at other customers, look at how we can get more of the customers that we currently have, how we can reduce our costs, how we can increase our revenues. And that's more of a systematic approach to it. So that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment is companies that want to innovate, don't particularly know where to start innovating, particularly small businesses who are actually just almost day to day trying to survive. So actually to find the time, the energy, the space to be innovative is challenging. And so that's why I'm quite keen to advocate the kind of explore exploit model, because you kind of have to be ambidextrous. You have to be that ambidextrous organization that creates space for the exploration, the new ideas, the new thinking, while you continue to run the existing business, which needs to pay for your staff, your mortgages, your food, and everything else. And it is tough. But certainly at RGU, anybody interested in any of this stuff that wants to work with RGU, we can do it. We can do it through interface. You can come direct, whatever. We're kind of happy to support as much as possible, and we're always delighted when interface asks us along to talk about this activity. It's quite a new model. It's quite an evolving model. I think it still needs to be robustly tested. But I'm certainly happy to advocate it. I'm going to try and do something in RGU, which follows a similar model as well. So, it's not just the tourism sector that needs to incorporate these models. Higher education needs to start looking at these models. Construction needs to start looking at these models. Transportation needs to start looking at these models. So yeah, hopefully it will help you.
Great, thanks, Chris. We've got another question from, I think Ricardo and Rachel has answered your question about drones. So that was around what did you think about the use of drones to collect data? Another one from Sophie Gartshore, working in the spirit of the Highlands project for High Life Highlands. Lots of take-home notes from the presentations. Yeah, I think we're all in the same boat there. Just wondering about the availability of sensor tech for companies to install. For instance, has COVID created a backlog in terms of making devices available to implement in sites? And Rachel, you highlighted the affordability of these for businesses, but are there many running costs? Maybe, I don't know, Josh, Rachel, do you want to have thoughts on that one?
I was just in the middle of responding to Sophie in a manual way, so I'll just delete that bit there. But yeah, so I think the main thing about IoT, I think one of my slides is it's never been easier to set up a network, and it really hasn't. There's loads of developer communities online. One which is the Things Network community. I can provide a link to that. Will actually give you they've actually got a little calculator there that you can run through a scenario, and it will give you a kind of a cost basis for that. But essentially, many of these things are open source, so you can have your your open source connectivity. So typically, if you're attaching sensors to a network, you're going to pay a subscription fee, and it might be £1 a month or something per sensor. But the Things Network, for example, is one, and there's others as well where it is a free connectivity. So it's within the kind of open source license that they provide. There is really good low cost solutions that you can do, at least to start your return on investment that Chris was mentioning. You don't really have to expend initially a huge rollout just to test something out. In fact, I think there's some of the IoT networks being run within Scotland are on the Things network, where they, you know, there's a zero subscription. But you do have to have a bit of capability in managing the networks, managing the servers and the dashboards that you're getting as well. But so it's so I think is that any solution can fit any pocket really at the moment, I think.
Okay, that's great. We have another one from Claire Winskill from East Lothian. How is it envisaged that the connectivity required is achieved? What infrastructure will need to be in place to track and manage visitor flow? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, it's we only had the conversation this morning, so I think some of the connectivity things are going to be still in play, and actually how we capture that information in multiple sites and connect them all. But I think Rachel actually put a really good answer within the text. I actually copied and pasted it so I could refer to it later. But we've got, and I think I've just seen from Claire as well around the work in Sky, and obviously Ricardo's on the call. So there's a few of us who are hopefully working on some of these projects, and we'll be able to address some of these challenges as and when they arise.
Sorry, Claire, my mistake. I'm getting my Sky and East Lothian mixed up, sorry. So we've got a few minutes left. If anyone's got any more questions, or if there's anything, the other thing that you can do is you can sign up for Interface newsletters and Traveltech for Scotland newsletters. If there's anything that you want to see from us in terms of events, you know, and what we can explore next year, in terms of technology, or of course, as we've said, if any of you are interested in exploring anything that you've heard today further with any of the speakers, we will be sharing the video and all the slides and some information from each of the organisations. So yeah, just if there's nothing else, we've still got a little bit of time, so if anyone's got any observations or any questions, or any of the panel have anything that they...
Murray has put something in there, so what's the best way for us interested to stay in touch? And I guess it's that getting something started question. And I think in the past, what we've done is then basically, if there's an interest to get something going quickly, like we can get in a virtual room just on one specific project. And I know you've got one already going. And I think I've already copied your email address. So maybe we can get in touch in the new year, have a little meeting session, and then see how we can actually just move it forward. If there's funding we can bring in, or if there's a particular partner, and then just try and be quite action oriented with it. So yeah, I'll pop you an email and we'll get some things sorted.
Yeah, Murray, it's quite good if we can get the details of what you're looking for, and you know, a bit of information about your project, then we can certainly help and take it further with a chat. Okay, so other people are just saying thank you very much. So if there are no further questions, we're going to finish on time, which is great. So I'd like to thank all our speakers: Rachel Wakefield from Censis, Chris Moole from Robert Gordon University, and Josh Ryan-Saha from Traveltech for Scotland, and thank my colleagues Elena and Heather for keeping all the tech on the go. And thank you very much for attending, everyone, today. It's great to have your interest, and as I say, you know, we'll follow up with you, and thank you very much. Take care.